I'm so excited. This series is like, I spend so much time reading Exodus now, it's like I feel like I'm bleeding it out of my eyes, but it's like I love Moses because I feel like when we read Paul and like we read the letters in the New Testament from Paul, like as we read, we feel like we're getting like smacked in the face the entire time. You're like, ow, that hurt, Paul. But when we read Exodus and when we see who Moses is at the beginning of his journey, there's a little bit more ability to empathize with him and go, oh, that's me. I've screwed stuff up. I've made decisions that have like derailed my life. I have doubts and I have complicated relationship with God where it's like, I want to serve you, God, but like I don't feel able and I don't feel capable and called. And so I think as we read through Exodus today, you're going to find yourself being a little bit more encouraged and empathetic with somebody who becomes a great church leader, but does not start out that way. So last week, we introduced the story of Moses and his miraculous birth in the face of Pharaoh's fear-fueled, murderous decrees. And we saw a young man be rescued from the mouths of fate by God's providence and delivered into the arms of his own mother, who was paid to raise him. And eventually, Moses entered into the service of Pharaoh's palace and was prepared and trained to be the next Pharaoh of Egypt. Yet, as Moses benefited from this life of luxury and free of worry, his heart was burdened. He was burdened with a concern for his people, God's chosen people. So as Moses tries to explore and assimilate back into the arms of his people, he murders an Egyptian for treating one of his brothers poorly, buries him in the sand, comes back, attempts again to connect with his brothers, but his fellow Hebrews don't see him as an equal in their suffering. Moses may be Hebrew in heritage, but he's Egyptian in habit. While they sweat, suffer, and toil, Moses lounges in the palace, fills his belly with the excesses of the kingdom. So, not satisfied with the life that the Egyptian palace offers and still rejected by the very people that his heart longs to be with, Moses flees for his life to the land of Midian. Scripture tells us there he chooses a new life with seemingly no hope of returning to his life of Pharaoh's next in command or joining his people as a welcome brother. So Moses decides to dwell in Midian and start a new life. And for 40 years, he lives this new life, seemingly never looking back over his shoulder at the possibility of his old life in Egypt coming back up. He had given up hope. And we all do the same thing. We look over our shoulders at lost opportunities, lost jobs, lost relationships, and we wonder, what could have been? But just as God was working amid the plans of an evil tyrant like Pharaoh to save Moses' life, he's also actively working to renew Moses' purpose in a new kingdom, in God's kingdom. So today, we're going to meet with a downtrodden, doubting, and seemingly hopeless Moses in the desert, and we're going to see how God gives him a new purpose. God knew what he was doing during those 40 years that Moses spent in Midian, and God was working on Moses' heart to prepare him what would come. Although Moses may not have felt or seen it, God did not give up his promise to his people because God never fails. Moses saw himself as unworthy and incapable, and he thought, even God, surely God, there's somebody better than me. But the problem is God wasn't calling upon Moses for the person that he was, but for the person that he would become. And God's not simply waiting on the best read or the smartest or the least sinful person to show up and be like, here's perfection, Lord, go ahead and use me. Instead, God calls the unqualified because the unqualified are the ones whose hearts are ready to be led rather than insisting that their way is the best way. So if you feel unqualified to do God's will, you're in good company because we all are. None of us have the accolades or achievements racked up to qualify us. It is through Christ and Christ alone that we are qualified to do the work of God, and it is through the power of his Spirit that we are made capable to do that work. So my question today is, do we believe that? Do we believe that God is at work in our lives despite our trials, our failures, our betrayals, and that God has a plan that's custom catered for your exact specifications? Because the key is to realize that God isn't asking you to be ready. He's asking you to trust that he is. So let's dive in. Exodus chapter 3, Verse 1, again, he's left his life in Egypt. He's been in Midian for 40 years. He's being the shepherd. He's walking around in the desert, and we find him tending to his flock of his father-in-law Jethro. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. And Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. "This is amazing," Moses said to himself. "Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it." When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, he called to him from the middle of the bush, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," Moses replied. "Do not come any closer," the Lord warned. "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, "I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt." But Moses protested to God, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Egypt?" And Moses asks one question, but with asking that one question, he's really asking two things. I think he's asking the question that any of us would ask in that circumstance, which is, me? Like, why me, God? Like, surely there's somebody else. Like, any of us, I don't know if any of us have the pride within us right now to be like, no, I would do it. Like, yeah, if God called me here, I'd go. No. I think we all sit in that space of like, oh, surely not me, Lord. Surely like somebody next to me, maybe that guy, I see him serving on team, he's probably better than me. Like, I don't know, maybe pick that guy, not me. But at the same time, Moses is asking another question. And we can take his question more literally. He says, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh?" Moses is asking God, literally, who am I? I spent 40 years in Egypt being trained to be Pharaoh's replacement. That crashed and burned. I attempted to assimilate with my people, the Hebrews, these chosen people. I was cast out, so that crashed and burned. And so now I'm here, a foreigner in a foreign land, just tending to sheep, but I still feel like a foreigner. Lord, who am I? This 40 years in Midian, Moses has not found his identity. He's still wondering, who am I, God? How could you possibly call upon me? What am I supposed to be doing for you, Father? How could I possibly be the one that you're calling upon to free your people from Egypt? And God's response to him is like, no, I'll be with you. Notice that God's response to Moses is like, oh, God, not me, not me. God doesn't like fluff Moses up and go, oh, come on, Moses, you're great, buddy. Like, you're so funny and helpful. Like, you're so nice. Remember how you killed that Egyptian? You're so strong. Come on, Moses, you got this. Like, he doesn't fluff up his pride, and he doesn't pat him on the back and say, oh, no, buddy, it's going to be okay. Come on. Like, you're so good. You're so smart. It's like, no, God's like, I'm not worried about your accolades, and I'm not worried about your resume. What I'm trying to tell you is like, no, I'm going to use you. I'm going to send you. I just need you to go. You just need to start walking. I've got all the details handled. I'm just using you as a vessel. Do you trust me when you go? A couple of years ago, I noticed when I was walking, I don't even know if Bree knows this or not, because that's how like subtle it was. But like when I would walk, it was like I would do this. Like I couldn't get my foot to like roll the right. It was like I was just picking up and putting my leg down like this. And it wasn't that extreme. And I know all of you are going to like watch me walk off stage at the end of this and be like, that limp though. You know, it's like, I promise you, it was like kind of subtle, but in my mind, it was like a big deal. It's like, what is going on? It was like the muscles I needed to like get my foot to walk the right way were not activating in my leg. And you can ask Bree, I'm a hypochondriac, so I'm like, oh, my leg's not working. I have breast cancer. Like, I mean, so like, I need to go to the doctor. I need to get this checked out. Something's heinously wrong with me. And so I'm praying about it. I'm like, God, what do I need to do? Like, who do I need to go see? And he's like, you don't need to go see a doctor, Mitch. You're fine. Like, what you need to do is you need to start walking intentionally. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, walk, like, put your foot the way you want it to go and walk intentionally, like the way your leg is supposed to walk. I was like, okay. So, like, at school, it was a time in my life where I was sitting a lot. At school, I was sitting a lot. At work, whatever, same thing. I was sitting a lot. At home, I wasn't really walking all that much. And so during my lunch break at school, I would eat my lunch and I would walk. And I probably looked like a fool walking down the hall. I'm sitting here like this, like heel, toe, heel, toe. I'd walk around our neighborhood and I'd do the same thing. And I was just very intentional about the way I was walking. And over the course of a couple weeks, what I realized is whatever muscle needed to be activated was reactivated. And it started to get exercised again. And I realized, like, eventually, again, don't judge me as I walk off the stage. I promise you I'm healed, okay? And now I'm fine. And what I realized that God was just telling me, no, you just need to start walking and trust me in this process that you will be healed and that you will be provided for and that I will be there in the midst of it. You don't need to go to the doctor and have them install a bionic leg. You're going to be fine, okay? And so that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'll just start walking. And that's what God's telling Moses to do right now. He's saying to Moses, like no, Moses, you're mishearing me. I'm telling you, I have heard the cry of my people, and I decided I will free them. I'm just sending you to do it for me. Moses claps back, and he's like, oh, no, God, not me. Do you know how much I've messed up in life? Do you know? And God's like, no, I will be with you. I'm not asking you because of who you are and what you've done. I'm saying I will be with you. One time, Melvin, who plays bass up here, Melvin asked me one time, Mitchell, do you want to go to jail? And I was like, what? And he was like, really, you don't know, Melvin is the captain of the sheriff's department in Montgomery County. So he was like, no, you can come visit the jail, and like, I'll let you walk around, and then I'll take you to like the SWAT unit, and you can see all their trucks and their weapons and stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I'm like standing there in my closet trying to figure out what to wear, because I'm like, I don't know what the dress code is for jail. So I'll just dress like I'm going to church. I don't know, that seems like appropriate. And so we get there, and it's really cool, because, Melvin's like, the captain is like only a couple guys below the sheriff. So when Melvin enters a room, everybody's like, oh, Captain Melvin, how you doing? Like, what's going on, Captain Melvin, Captain Melvin? And so because I was with Melvin, all of a sudden I'm VIP. And so they see Melvin and they see me, and he goes, oh, yeah, this is Mitch with Zeal House Church. And I was like, how you doing? How you doing? What's going on? Yeah, I know, I'm just walking around the jail. And so, I got to go into all these spaces that I would not typically be allowed in, but because I was with Melvin, one, I was allowed, and two, people gave me the respect that Melvin had because I was associated with him. And that's what God's saying to Moses. He's like, Moses, I'm not asking you to go on your authority. You don't have the badge to get where I can go. What I'm saying is, Lord, I'm going to allow you to enter into these spaces via my power. Are you going to trust me? You are a vessel. Just start walking. And I think up until this point, we've had, you can relate with Moses. Like, he hasn't asked anything ridiculous. He's asked God, oh, well, why me? And then he's asked, like, well, under what authority am I going? He asked God, okay, well, if I'm going to go to your people and tell them that you've sent me, what name should I give them? And this seems kind of silly at first. You would think like God, right? He goes back and says, God sent me. But in the Old Testament, God often gives himself a specific name based off the situation that these people are in. So he gives El Elyon, God of the Most High, El Shaddai, Almighty God, El Olam, Everlasting God, Jehovah Jireh, the God that will provide, El Roy, you are the God who sees, El Elohi Israel, the God of Israel. And so God, depending on the circumstance, gives himself a specific name. So when there's a time in the Old Testament when people feel like God doesn't see their suffering, he says, no, I am El Roy, the God who sees. When people in the Old Testament are wondering, oh, well, will we be provided for? God, will you come through? He says, yes, I am Jehovah Jireh. I am the God who provides. So God gives a name based on how he's going to respond to a particular circumstance. So when Moses asked God, what name should I tell them? God tells Moses, I am has sent you. I am who I am is sending you. And this is where I feel like the English language kind of falls short. I am to us it doesn't have the same impact that it really should, because we think I am what? Like whatever. It seems like an incomplete phrase to us, right? And it's not even an issue of like, let's look at the Hebrew. It's more of just like, do we understand what God is trying to express here? And for the first time, and probably the only time, I'm going to use a mathematical example to prove a point. I am not a math genius. I'm good with logical math. You give me a circle and like geometry, you want me to know how big that is? I can measure it with a tape measure. That's easy math. You say, Mitchell, I give you $10. It's a 5% interest rate. How much money will we have after 6 months? I can do that. That's logical math. When you give me half the alphabet and half the numbers, and then you ask me what shape is the loop on the graph, No idea. Also, don't understand why it matters. But anyway, God equals God. That's easy math, right? 1 equals 1, 5 equals 5, 100 equals 100. That's easy math. You cannot put anything on the left side, right side of this equation that will equal the left side other than God. There is nothing that can replace God that will be equal to God. It has to be God equals God. What God is expressing to Moses is, hey, I am, meaning like, we can't say, I am who I am. No, I am who I am because of my parents, right? My parents are who they are because of their parents. Like, I am not of myself. I am created by other beings, right? What God is expressing to Moses is, no. I am existence. I was, I always have been, I am, and I forever will be. I am is sending you. The author of creation, the ultimate authority, is sending you. Do you understand? It's key that he's using this particular name for sending Moses, because it's not just the God that provides, like he's going to provide. It's not just the God who sees, he sees as well. But what God is saying is, no. I am the ultimate authority, and that is who is sending you right now, Moses. So he tells Moses the name is Yahweh. This is not a name that is like new to the Hebrews. It's used like over 160 times in the Old Testament. It is like the ultimate name of God. Hebrews or Jews even, they don't say Yahweh because it is like the most high, most reverent name of God. So they don't even say it. But what God is saying right now is like, no. Let me give you like my most intense, most hardest hitting name I could possibly give you. I am the ultimate name of God. That's who's sending you. I have the ultimate authority. That's who's going with you. And so, after Moses asks what name he's sending, or what name he's using, God lays out the entire plan. He's like, all right, Moses, so look, this is who's sending you. This is the authority who's sending you. And this is going to be a testimony. You're going to come back to this mountain and you're going to worship me after you free the Israelites. It's going to be great. You're going to be great. Also, when you go and you talk to the elders, they're going to believe you. I'm telling you that right now. And also, when you go talk to Pharaoh, he's not going to believe you. He's going to give you a hard time. But trust me, I've got this and I'm working with you. I'm going to be with you during this entire process. So God lays out the entire plan. He's telling him, like, look, I've thought this all the way through. But in Exodus 4, 1 through 9, Moses says, but what if they don't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? If you just noticed in Exodus 3:18, God literally said, they will listen to you. And now Moses is doubting the very thing that God told him he was about to do. So you can see God's kind of like, okay. I've been giving you this plan. I know this is very abstract. You know, when God gives us plans, sometimes it's very like abstract and heady, and we're like, can I have a little bit of proof? You know, we read about Gideon in the Bible, like, oh, Lord, if you make the fleece wet in the morning, then I'll know it's you. Or, you know, you reach in your pocket and you're like, God, if I have 3 quarters, then I'll know that you're speaking to me right now. And it's like you pull it out and there's 2 dimes and you're like, darn it, okay, I'm trying, Lord, I'm trying. Like, it's like we love that tangibleness, right? Like we just want like a visual, like all of us really want a neon sign that says, go this way, talk to this person, right? And Moses is the same. Moses is like, okay, I hear you, God, but what if they don't believe me? Like, let's just say, I know you said they will, but like, what if they don't? And God's like, okay, look, let me be a little bit more gracious with you. Let me give you some concrete examples. He's like, what's that in your hand? Moses is like, a staff. He's like, okay, throw it on the ground. He throws it on the ground, it turns into a serpent. And it's apparently so terrifying, Moses flees from it. He runs from it. And God says, no, go pick it up. Moses picks up the staff by the tail, or the snake by the tail, turns back into a staff. God's like, okay, now put your hand inside of your cloak. He puts it in, pulls it back out. It's leprous. It's white. It's got boils all over it. And he says, put it back in. He puts it back in, pulls it out. It's healed again. And God's saying, like, these will be a sign to the people. And I think part of it is that, one, God understands that, like us, sometimes we have a hard time with trusting the abstract, and we just want like a nice concrete example. And so God goes, okay, here, look, I can turn your staff into a snake, I can turn your hand into a cursed thing, and I can heal it instantly. Do you think that I've thought this through? Like, Moses, do you understand that I'm in control of the most intimate details here? Do you not trust that I've thought this out and that everything's going to be okay? And this may be me reading into the text a little bit, but I also think it's key that both of those signs dealt with transformation. He transformed the staff into a snake. He transformed Moses' hand into a leper's hand because he knows that Moses needs that transformation. He understands where Moses' heart right now. He's doubting. He's he's not confident in himself. He's not confident in God. And God knows that Moses needs to be transformed in this moment. So he's showing him, look, Moses, I can transform the most intricate details of the plan. Do you not trust that I'm going to be with you? And so we would think that's enough. We would think like Moses is satisfied, but no. We still see in chapter 4, verse 10, Moses then goes on. He produces another protest. He says, but Lord, I'm not very good with words. Like, I never have been. I'm not now. And even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled up. And this is where you feel like God turns up the sass knob just a little bit. And he's like, then the Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak? They can hear or do not hear. They see or they don't see. Is it not me, Moses? Now go. I will be with you as you speak. I will instruct you in what you say. God's saying again, Moses, you're overthinking the leg. I just need you to start walking and trust me in the process. God, never at any point during this is God like, man, Moses, you've really been proving yourself over these past 40 years, and now you've finally made it to the point where I can trust you to do this. God is saying, no, I'm going to do something, and I'm going to use you. I just need you to go. And what Moses is saying to God in all these protests is like, no, not me. I'm not good enough. Surely somebody else is going, right? Like, why would you pick me? And it's an issue of self-confidence in Moses. And some of it is like, understandable. There's a very fine line between self-awareness and disobedience. When I was getting hired for my second teaching job, they were interviewing me, and they were like, okay, Mr. Banks, so you're going to be teaching English, advanced English to 8th graders, and you're going to teach 7th grade ESL English, and then we were wondering if you were comfortable with it, you could teach algebra to 6th graders. And I was like, here's the thing, am I willing to? Absolutely. I will do this because you're asking me to. I'm telling you right now, I have enough self-awareness that will be a detriment to their education and the future of my career. You do not want me teaching algebra to 6th graders. And so I didn't end up teaching algebra to 6th graders. Praise God for those children and myself. And there's an element of we can come to God and be like, I don't need to do any of y'all's taxes. Okay, I'm self-aware. Brianna does our taxes. She's incredible at it. I'm aware I'm not great with numbers. But there's a difference between being like, okay, God, give me all the details so I can better understand how to accomplish this mission that we have for one another. And then there's a difference between that and going, yeah, God, I hear everything you're saying, and you're wrong. I'm not the right guy. No. Because at this point, Moses is just flat out being disobedient. And you can tell by his final cry, because even when he says, oh, I don't speak very well, God says, fine, your brother Aaron can be your mouthpiece, okay? Aaron will go with you. He will speak for you. There, we've solved that problem. Anything else? And Moses finally says in Exodus 4:15, he says, God, will you just choose anybody else but me, please? Just choose anybody else. And so we see in that final protest, it's kind of like, have you ever asked somebody to the movies and you're like, hey, do you want to go see a movie? And they're like, well, what time? And you're like, anytime, afternoon, nighttime, I don't care, whenever you're good. And they're like, all right, but what do you want to go see? You're like, I don't care, what you pick, whatever you want to go see. I'll just go see whatever you want to. I just want to go to the movies. And they're like, I don't know, it's kind of expensive. And you're like, yeah, I'll pay for you. I'll pay your way, no big deal. And they're like, yeah, but my tummy hurts. And you're like, do you want to go to the movies or not? If you don't want to go, just say no. Stop stringing me along with these excuses. And it's we can see that's where Moses' head is at. We can tell that these protests he's giving, again, he's not asking God, please let me understand so I'm better equipped. So so tell me, why are you using me? Okay. What authority am I going with? Okay. No, Moses is not trying to better understand so that he can prepare himself. Moses is so stuck in his own insecurity that when God spoke to him out of that bush and called him forward, Moses approached in shame. Moses said, no, Lord, please don't do this. Please don't use me. I've messed it up enough, Lord. Please don't call me into another place of failure. Because I don't think Moses' heart was prepared to see another failure in his life. And what God's trying to tell Moses again is it's not about you, Moses. I have equipped you. You are going to be my vessel, and I will lead you. I'll give you the right words. I'm going to make sure the people listen to you who need to listen to you. Moses, all I'm asking you to do is get up and start walking the right way. Do you trust that I'm going to be with you in the midst of that? And my final point here is, I don't know if any of you remember Captain Chelsea Sully Sullivan. January 15th, 2009, his plane took off from New York, and very shortly after takeoff, he hit a flock of geese, and the geese destroyed both of his airplane engines. So he immediately had to make an emergency landing. And so he's radioing back to the tower, and they're like, okay, well, do you want to land at LaGuardia? He's like, I can't make it to LaGuardia. And okay, do you want to go to Timberlone or whatever the other smaller one is there? And he's like, I can't make it there. And they're like, okay, well, where do you want to land? And he's like, I'm going to land in the Hudson. They're like, the river? What do you mean? He's like, I'm going to land in the Hudson. And sure enough, he is able to pilot his plane perfectly in the middle of the Hudson River. He lands the plane, and everyone on the plane survives. Crew, captain, passengers, everyone. Everyone is able to escape the boat. They're taken away, and he is hailed as a hero. But the funny thing is, if you read some interviews with Captain Sully, he said right before the landing were the worst, most sickening pit of your stomach falling through the floor feeling that he had ever experienced. This was a man who had been flying for 20 plus years. He had gone through so many flights. He had experienced training. He had even had emergency landing training, and he admitted nothing like this. Nothing could have prepared him for this. But on paper, Sully was the perfect person for this particular circumstance. If we were to, in hindsight, look at captains and pick who was going to land this plane in the middle of this emergency, you would pick Sully. He was the most capable. And I think the problem right now is that Moses is looking at himself on the leaderboard and saying, I'm at the bottom of the barrel. God, I'm not the person you want to choose to do this. My accolades don't stack up my accolades don't stack up to what you're trying to do, God. And the thing is, when God looks at us, he doesn't look at us and say, they're not good enough. Maybe I'll try somebody else. God's looking at us and say, I want somebody with a humble heart. I'm not looking for somebody who's perfect. I'm not looking for somebody who has enough degrees on the wall or enough money in the bank. What I'm looking for is a heart that is willing to just get up and start walking when I say go. He's not looking for perfection. He's looking for humility. And it's funny, Captain Sully, another quote he made was, one way of looking at this might be that in my 42 years, I've been making small, regular deposits in the bank of experience, education, and training. And on January 15th, the balance was sufficient so I can make a very large withdrawal. Captain Sully is saying that everything in my life I experienced led me up to that moment. Yes, I was sick to my stomach while it was happening because there's nothing that could have happened that could ultimately prepare me to land that plane with all of those people on board. But what he realized was there's something about all the experiences I've had in life have led up to this point and have prepared me for this moment, and ultimately had to trust that God would take care of landing that plane and saving those people. That's where we're at with God. You say, man, I haven't done enough. God's not waiting on you. Well, once you read your Bible enough, or once you start praying enough, you're going to get there. I'm like, God's waking up every day. He's like, you're about to level up. Just keep reading that Bible. You'll be there eventually. No, he's saying, all I want is your heart to be willing. He's like, I can take care of all that other stuff. I just want your heart to be willing. God's saying, I'm not telling you that you need to be ready. What I'm saying is you need to trust that I already am. I am ready. And so eventually, Moses submits, and he says, okay, God, do with me as you will. He goes to his father, Jethro, and he says to him, please let me return to my relatives in Egypt. Sorry, this is verse 18. Moses said, I don't even know if they're still alive. Go in peace, Jethro replied. But before Moses left Midian, the Lord said to him, return to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you have died. So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and headed back to the land of Egypt. In his hand, he carried the staff of God. And next week, we're going to dive into the plagues, the scary part of the Bible, right? But what's important to remember is that journey from Midian back to Egypt, that God has given this promise to Moses, and Moses fought with him and gave these objections and battled him on the point. But ultimately, Moses has to say, okay, God, I'm going to go. And he's going to start walking back to Egypt. That's where the work is done in our lives. It's in between the promise and the delivery of that promise that we grow in faith. If God says, yeah, this is going to happen, and then all of a sudden it happens 5 minutes later, there's no growth there. That's just, God is a vending machine. God just gives as we please. But God tells him, you're going to go back to Egypt. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to have it completely handled. I just need you to start walking. And Moses goes, okay. And how much do you bet as he starts walking, those doubts start creeping in again? Did I miss here? Man, I've got so many journal entries in my journal where it's like, God, thank you so much for speaking this into my life. I'm so excited for this. And then you can flip forward a few weeks, and I'm like, God, did I hear you right? God, did I miss here? God, what is going on? Like, help me to have that faith, Lord. I believe, help my unbelief. That is just the human condition. And that's the thing. God does not disqualify us for that. God didn't wait on Moses and go, he's not good enough. If he says one more thing, I swear I'm cutting him off. He's like, no, he's saying, I just want you to get up and start walking. God's not asking you to be ready. He's asking you to trust that he already is.